Welcome, and thank you for joining us on What's New with Sage Intacct session today. Few housekeeping items. Don't forget to ask questions along the way with these presentations. We will have moderators who will be gathering up those questions and getting those answered either immediately or afterwards after the conference. So feel free to ask questions in the chat inside the session itself. Keep in mind, each of these sessions are being recorded so they can be replayed at a later date. So if you have if you're not able to attend all the sessions, or if you have other team members who would like to see these sessions, you can drive them back to these recorded sessions. And don't forget to fill out your surveys. There are awards or prizes that are going to be given out at the end of the sessions today, including gift cards and espresso machines, one of my favorites. I wake up every morning with an espresso machine. I hope you will get a chance to as well. And then also other gifts as well. So don't forget to fill out those surveys. Please give us that feedback. It's very helpful. So I am your presenter today. My name is Jeff Vonasek. I'm principal architect here at Quisitive. I've been in the accounting industry, in ERP industry, for over 30 years or so. Had the pleasure of doing over 200 or so implementations of our customers. In my area of expertise, traditionally were Dynamics products that included GP and SL. For the last 13 years or so, I've been focused on Sage Intacct implementations. When I'm not working on the implementations, I live in Virginia, Annandale, Virginia, with my wife and our 3 children. I'm an avid golfer and an avid endurance cyclist. Endurance cycling is when you put your butt in a seat and pedal for about 100 miles or so. And I find that you get a chance to think about a lot of things when you're out on the road and just pedaling for the next 20 miles or so for the next stop. And so I find achieving those goals every year very meaningful to me. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So today we're going to discuss what's new with Sage Intacct. There's a lot to cover here today. I don't intend to cover everything that's new with Sage. And as you well know, when you sign into Sage, you have an opportunity to read the latest release notes. But I'm going to touch on some of the things I think are most important and maybe demonstrate a few of them so that you can carry 1 or 2 tidbits from today's session back with you to your office so that you can improve your experience and performance with inside of Sage Intacct. So we're going to look at company administration, core modules. The whole list is here. Let's start with some of the new enhancements in company administration. So the first one is that there is now an option for email delivery services to use your domain when emails come out of Sage Intacct. That would be invoices, purchase orders, things like that. If the natively out of the box, they come out with an @sage.com domain, and this gives you an opportunity to line it up with your, so @Quisitive, for example, and then therefore is much more easily recognizable by your customers or vendors who are receiving those invoices from you. It does require some IT setup, and so there's some specs there that need to be worked out, but reach out to one of our team members and we can work with your IT team to get it configured such, if that's what you'd like to do. We also have some new security features like masking bank information for employees if you use the employee expense reporting system and reimburse employees that way. With those customers who have integrations in the Sage Intacct, there's a new administrative screen that allows you to see your API usage. So you can see the amount of transactions that are flowing between the 2 systems and be able to help monitor that, and maybe even see if there's some external or more usage than you want it to be, not external, but more usage than you want it to be. So you can help tune and tweak that performance to be as efficient as possible, and also to limit your costs for integrations. Under the area of user experience and account recovery, there is a link now on the sign-in page that allows people to reset their password, even if their account is locked out. So in the past, users had to, if their account was locked out, had to reach out to the administrator of the account, have their account unlocked, send a password reset. Now the users can all do that self-service. It does require those challenge questions that users set up when they first configure their account inside of Sage Intacct. And it doesn't prevent the administrator from being able to go in and unlock an account if they want to. But this ideally allows the users to address that issue themselves without having to reach out to an administrator. And that's often helpful when you're trying to do something on a Sunday night to get ready for a Monday morning meeting and find your account's locked out, can't do anything. Well, now the user's got an opportunity to recover their account themselves. If your organization has a sandbox of Sage Intacct, you can refresh that sandbox with a subscription 3 times a year or 4 times a year, the first time it's done with the renewal of the subscription. But you also had to reach out to one of our team members to do that renewal. Now you have the ability to, not renewal, to do refreshment. Now you have the ability to refresh the sandbox yourself right within inside of Sage Intacct. So no need to reach out to a team member anymore. You can make that request, and in a day or two, Sage's services team will refresh that sandbox for you automatically. There are new permissions that have been added to the roles and permissions or subscriptions tab for users and/or roles. These align with the new feature functionality that we're going to talk about today. So keep in mind, with the new features that come out, you must assign the rights for users to be able to do that. So go back and review your roles and your subscriptions in those roles and make sure that those roles have all the functionality, all the new functionality that you want to have them. Sage continues to update its help text and stories, journeys on the path of Sage Intacct and how you operate and use it, including new videos, including new help sections. So if you haven't used help in a while, poke around a bit, see what's new and what's been added. Very helpful for our customers. Did want to let you know that there is an option for you to be able to customize your help. You can do this by adding new tabs to data entry screens where you can provide information about maybe procedures or process that you want to share with the person who's doing this data entry. Or you can add links to other critical sites, like maybe some internal sites or some external websites that can provide guidance to the users who need to perform that function or do whatever data entry there is. This is a feature that's been out there for a while. Not a lot of people know about it, but it is available. Reach out to one of your consultants if you need some help and would like to customize that experience for those users. The user interface has changed a bit recently. If you haven't noticed, it's been tightened up, freshened up, kept modern with basically internet standards as well. But there's some new feature functionality I'd like to show you that I think it's of value to you, and that is in the area of the list views. Now, these list views are provided in many different areas. For example, it's vendors, customers, attachments, departments, and they provide more information at a glance than what we traditionally saw inside of Sage. So let me show you that. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here. Let's just go to our accounts payable and go to our vendor listing. And you'll notice in our vendor listing, I have broken out what's now called a form view of our vendors. So I'm going to go back to the traditional view just so you can see what you normally would see inside of Sage Intacct. So traditional view has each of the vendors listed down here with some information that's provided, account information like the total balance. And I can customize these views to add new fields to them, whatever I might necessarily need. And to edit a vendor, then I just merely click on the vendor and it opens up the vendor maintenance screen and I can tab through each of the features of that particular vendor. With the form view, which is a new option that shows on the upper right-hand side here, I get to switch between a listing of my vendors, a short listing of my vendors on the left, and then the vendor maintenance or vendor view pane over here that provides all that same information without having to click into an edit. And I can move between vendors just by clicking them one at a time. to be able to easily drill down into the details of that particular vendor. If I do find that I want to make a change for that vendor, I just click the edit button, and now it brings me to the edit screen. I can make that change, hit the save, and move on. So nice new feature on how to maintain and manage your vendors, customers, any records that you have with inside of Sage Intacct. General Ledger, there is a new feature in General Ledger that will allow you, with the proper rights, to change your account numbers. Now, this is most helpful if you've got account sequences that are a bit out of order and you would like to restructure and reorder them. Or more properly, if you decide to redesign your chart of accounts and you'd like to take the old accounts and make them new accounts, then you can use this feature to change your account numbers. For example, if you merge with another organization, now you want to have a chart of accounts that's consistent of both your organization and new organization, you might want to restructure your chart of accounts to meet that need. This is done because behind the scenes, Sage keeps track of each of the account records with a numeric sequence number that you don't get to see. Essentially, it's a way of identifying each one of those records. And the account number that you use is just merely a field with inside of that record. So there's an ID for the record, then there's the account number itself. And all we're doing is changing the account number itself. And if we do that, what that means is that all of the references to that account, that's in journal entries, in setup screens, in reports, they all automatically change as well. So this is a new feature. It does require turning it on inside of General Ledger configuration or setup. It also requires assigning the rights to users to be able to do this. So not everybody can do this. But once it's turned on, then you have the option to go ahead and change it. Not done frequently, but when you need to do it, it's definitely a useful and helpful thing. In many of the import screens that you find in Sage, they've added now links to the templates. Previously, you had to go to the import data section to export a template and work with it and then import it. Now, when I go into the import screens themselves, I have the ability to export the template straight out, which is a nice little ease of use feature. It's great to have. There's a new feature that allows you to drill down to transactional detail from store reports. So as you know, when you generate a financial report, you can generate to HTML, but you can also store that report. When the report is stored, it's what I call a static report, meaning it doesn't change. It is static to when you generate it as well. But in the past, when you generated a static report, you didn't have the option to drill down into the details. Now, when those static reports or stored reports are created, it also stores the details of it as well. So you can now drill down into the details of that and have better insight into the financial reports that you're seeing. There's a new feature inside of financial reporting that keeps track and history of the revisions or edits of your financial reports. Let's take a quick look at that. So I'm going to go to reports, and I'm going to go to financial reports, and I'm going to pull up one of my reports. Statement of activities. You can see I've got a bunch here, comparative, and I'm going to go ahead and edit it. Now, let's say that you are modifying or working on this report to meet your particular needs, and we'll just take a quick look at this report. So if I preview it, you'll see that this report has a couple columns: the original operating budget, the actual, the budget difference, and some notations. And let's say you just decided that, hey, what you'd like to do is get rid of that notation column. So I'm going to come to the notation column, go ahead and remove it from my report. Great. And if I preview it now, you'll notice that the notation is complete and done and removed from the report. I would save that. And then we take that to whoever consumes it, and they may say, oh, I needed that notation column. I really wished you hadn't removed it. Or maybe you added a new column or removed another column that you wanted to keep and bring back. Well, there's a new feature now inside of the financial report writer that gives you revision history of those financial reports. So as you make changes, it saves the original copy so that you can go back to the original copy if you want to. So you see I'm version 7 right now, but if I go back and view version 6 and go back to the columns, you'll notice that that notation is back. And having then added the notation back, I have the ability to restore that, so I can restore back to a version that I may have preferred in the past. This is very helpful when you're building new financial reports and trying and testing things out, and you accidentally get the report to a stage where it doesn't really help you anymore. You can go ahead and restore back to it. So nice little simple, straightforward, easy solution that is really helpful when building financial reports. In accounts payable, there's some new feature functionality, including the ability to recall a submitted AP bill. So if you're using AP bill workflow, when you enter and submit a bill for approval in the past, you could not edit or change a bill that's been submitted. You had to ask the approver to reject it, so it would come back into your queue and be able to edit it and then resubmit it. But now you can go out and recall a bill that's been submitted for approval but not yet approved, and then change it and then resubmit it as well. So nice little feature about workflow. There's also in accounts payable new feature functionality in filtering and sorting. This is requested by users and very helpful. So we'll go to accounts payable, for example, and go to the vendor aging and go to reports. And you remember the vendor aging report in the past, you could run it with just a few selection criteria. We now have these new filter ranges where I can do a range of vendors. I can do multiple vendors, so I can do a specific group of vendors. So if I have those, I would then go ahead and select whatever vendors I want to and add them. Or I can build a vendor group. So maybe I have a group of vendors that are specific to employees, and I just want to run an aged AP for employees. Maybe I have a group of vendors that are specific to commerce, and I want to just run that. So I could build a vendor group of any group, and the report will only include those vendors that are found inside of that group. There is a new feature in accounts payable during the payment process. I really like this one, so I'm going to go ahead and hit pay bills. And that new feature is it shows the preferred payment method in the pay bill screen itself when you're doing your payment processing. Very helpful when looking at vendors and saying, hey, I just want to do ACHs. So I'm looking for the vendors who prefer to get paid by ACHs, or I just want to do printed checks. And I'm looking for the vendors that prefer to do checks. So very nice little feature here that visually cues you on how vendors like to get paid and what processing you may want to do from there. There is a new feature inside accounts payable I strongly encourage everybody to use. That feature is called restriction of contacts. So when entering an AP bill, for example, today, and you identify the vendor, when you go to the ship to or bill to contact information and you hit the drop down, you're going to get a listing of all the contacts that exist inside of Sage Intacct. And that may not be very helpful for you to sort through that and find the ones that you want to. You now have a feature inside of setup where you can restrict to just the vendor contacts that you've associated with the vendor that you put on the AP bill itself. You can also restrict just to vendor contacts. So these two options here are restricting just to contacts that are created for under vendors, or restricting those that are created under the selected vendor. And what that does is narrow down and make it easier for users to enter the right piece of information when doing their data entry. There's a new vendor approval functionality in accounts payable. It does need to be set up inside of AP. So let's just take a look at our setups there. So in AP, there's a new approval setting here down at the bottom for vendors, vendor approval setting. When you do that, you get the option to identify whether an email notification will go out to the person who needs to approve the vendor so that they get an actionable item to go ahead and do the approval. This will apply to the creation of new vendors and the changing of vendors. So from an audit perspective, it's really securing down the creation and updating of vendors, requiring a second user or an administrative user to be able to approve any changes that are being done in the accounts payable system. And so that's a very nice feature inside of Sage Intacct. There's some sort of simple but nice features in the fact that, now submitters get approval notifications when their bill has been approved or rejected. In the past, they would have to go back to their AP bill list to see if there were any rejected bills. Maybe they built a view specific of it, but now they get an actual item, an email that says, hey, that AP bill was rejected. So now they drives them back to accounts payable to be able to edit and update that AP bill, whatever it might necessarily need to be. If you haven't looked into AP automation, or you're not using an AP automation product today, this is something I strongly encourage you to take a look at. So just by way of summary, AP automation is a way for the system to automatically create AP bills and decode those AP bills for you based upon the source document itself. That's the PDF you receive from the vendor of the invoice that you have. And when Sage Intacct AP Automation is doing this, it will look at the invoice, read the invoice, figure out who the vendor is from the invoice, figure out what the amount is of the invoice, and then create an AP bill. When it creates the AP bill, it associates the vendor, of course, but then it looks back into your history with all the activity you've done with that vendor to see what kind of coding you might necessarily need to do, and it'll suggest coding for you. Now, you can upload these AP bills one of two ways. You can either go into the AP bill screen itself and hit the upload button, in which you go out and find a PDF or Word document, whatever the environment of the document is, and import it into Sage Intacct, and then it will create what's called a draft AP bill. Now, these are always drafts because it requires a user to do the final review because, that user is accountable for this transaction. So they get to do the final review and then the submission of that AP bill for approval. There is a second method, and that is to submit these AP bills to an email address, and you will get an email address if you turn this feature on that is associated with each one of your entities. So it's like accounts payable at accounts payable quizzitive at sageintacct.com. And so what the user can do is they can receive an invoice into their inbox via email and then forward it directly to that email processor, and then that email processor or that email box will pick up processor and create the AP bill, and then that user goes back into Sage Intacct and goes into the AP bill screen to see that draft invoice, review it, and approve it. And in the perfect world, you get your vendors to send directly to this email address so that you don't need any intervention at all. Instead, what shows up is a bunch of draft bills that your vendors have all sent to that email processor that you now need to review and approve. So lots of new feature functionality around AP automation. When the AP automation kicks off, it uses artificial intelligence, or AI, to figure out how to code those bills. Now, it does that by going back and looking at all your historical transactions with those particular vendors, and it creates what they call vendor thumbprint. It tells a little bit about the vendor, where to find things on the invoice, what kind of coding we've used in the past, so on and so forth. This process is getting more and getting better and better, and getting better at doing line item now. So if you have vendors with multiple line items on their invoices, identifying which GL account should be associated, which dimensions should be associated with the line items, again, based upon your history of the AP bills in the past. It also now integrates with purchasing. So if you are using a purchase to AP bill workflow, where you're receiving invoices off of purchase orders to relieve them and then create AP bills, it'll do that three-way matching as well. And again, all this results in a draft AP bill that then the user gets to review, authorize, and then submit it for the approval. So lots of nice new improvements and functionality in AP automation. And purchasing, another little simple thing, if you have a purchase order that's been submitted, if it gets approved or rejected, you get notified that as well. You do have to turn on your email notifications for this all to take place, which is no surprise there. It's all found in the setup of the purchasing module. In accounts receivable, there is a new feature. This is actually, I'd say, in cash management that deals with customer payments. If you're using cloud banking services today, which means that every 30 minutes, Sage goes out to your bank account, pulls down new transactions from the bank account, and loads it inside of Sage Intacct. When it identifies customer payments inside of your bank account, there's a process in which you need to go in and associate it with the customer and then make a payment out of it and do the payment application. This process is now becoming more automated in the fact that you can build rules that says, if you can identify that payment for customer ABC, then I want you to associate it automatically with this customer. And then I automatically want you to apply it against the invoice, the oldest invoice it can find for that customer. If it can't find any invoices for that customer, it'll create an advance, which is the case if you have a payment from a customer that doesn't have an invoice to apply against. You need to create advance in Sage Intacct. So it'll handle all that as well. And of course, it'll do then the matching of that in the bank reconciliation process because it has created the payment transaction from the it has created the payment from the bank transaction. So it now knows those two items and it matches those together. Again, the goal there is to have it automate the reconciliation process as much as possible, so you're left with just fewer and fewer outliers that you need to resolve. So nice new feature in accounts receivable. There is a nice new feature in accounts receivable that deals with customers and what I call national accounts or parent-child relationships with customers. So in the past, you could identify a parent-child relationship between customers. But other than reporting, it didn't provide any functionality around that. And many of our customers wanted it. Essentially, what they wanted is to be able to identify multiple customers, that could receive payments against their invoices from a parent, from the customer. So maybe there's an association or group that represents the master customer, and then you've got individual members underneath of that are receiving invoices that you want to have pay, and that the parent pays it. So let's just take a quick look at that. In accounts receivable, there is a setting under setup, under configuration, where you can decide if you're going to enable single payment for multiple customers. So it's just a check mark box. Users do need to have the security rights to be able to do that. So go back and check again those roles and those subscriptions to be able to do that. But once that's turned on, then if I have a customer, let's say, for example, I've got a customer here that's got a parent-child relationship. And that's defined in the child customer, by the way, by identifying what the parent is, which is found on that additional tab of the customer itself. So once I have that relationship, when I go to receive a payment and add a new one, I can choose whether I just want to apply this payment to the customer I'm going to define here, or whether I want to apply this payment to the customer I define here and any of the children invoices it can find, or any invoices I can find in the system at all. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the parent and children, and I'm going to choose that customer who we know has got some children. You'd have, of course, you have a check number or whatever it would be, and the amount to receive. And now when I show invoices, you'll see I see invoices for the customer identified plus the child that identified in that relationship and the customer setup as well. And I can do the application against any of those. So it is true national accounts management or parent-child relationship management, something that many of our customers always wanted to see, but really wasn't there. It was a suggestion put out by the users, and Sage Intacct has acted upon it and created it. So great job. Really happy to see that. There are more flexibility in the AR aging report, just like the accounts payable aging report, and you can do it by multiple customers or by groups of customers if you define it as such. Similar to accounts payable, when working with invoices and you identify a customer and you want to change contacts, you can limit the contacts that you see. This is a setup option in AR setup to just contacts associated with this particular customer or vendor. Cash management has added support for our Canadian customers for Canadian bank transactions. These are ACH payments or EFT payments that are processed through Canadian banks. There's also a more advanced cloud banking connection called Access Pay. So for those of you who are using cloud banking services, which is native to Sage Intacct, you turn on and it pulls transactions down from the bank and then does the reconciliation process itself. You may have some issues in not being able to find the bank that you want to work with, or the bank that you work with uses different standards than what Sage Intacct does. You'll also notice that passwords change. You need to synchronize passwords, things like that. So what this tool does is it uses the Swift network to connect with your bank and uses APIs to pull transactions down from your bank account into Sage Intacct. It's a much more secure and robust connection. Now, because I'm using the Swift network and all banks in the world use the Swift network, this means I can interact with any bank, whether it be international or national. And because it is API driven, it is much more robust and less susceptible to changes like user account changes and things like that. Now, this is an additional service, so it's an additional subscription or fee that you have to pay. So there's some money to pay for it. But if you have any issues with the cloud banking services, either I can't find my bank or I can't get the transactions to flow properly, this could be a solution for you. And definitely, you've got international bank accounts that you need to manage. This is a really good solution. So something to consider. There's some enhanced reporting with inside of cash management with specifically the deposits reports, excuse me, that you'll see there. And then there's some nice enhancements that as we begin to work with international banks more and more, where dating can make a big difference given the international date line, where we can now have transactions adopt the timestamp of the location of the bank, as opposed to the timestamp of your system here. So if you've got a bank in England and you're doing transactions for here in the central, say, United States or North America, and that time zone is going to make a difference, it's going to push that bank transaction the next day, but you really don't want it to for reconciliation, you can use this to keep it to the time zone of the bank account itself. There's a nice new feature in consolidation that deals with advanced ownership. So advanced ownership is where you have a partial ownership in an entity that's found within inside of Sage Intacct. What this advanced consolidation will do is allow you to identify your ownership of that. And when doing consolidations, then that percentage, your ownership percentages, is what shows up in the consolidated reports. So no need to have to rejigger or adjust those financial reports afterwards to represent partial ownership. Nice new description. There's some reports that support the transactions around that as well. So you'll find those. There's also now the ability, if you're using global consolidations, domestic consolidations, or advanced ownership consolidations, to be able to drill down into the transactional detail. In the past, once the consolidated book was created, you lost all visibility of the transactional detail, basically it's summary that's being consolidated. Now that detail comes across and you're able to drill down into the details of the transactions from the consolidated books, not just your accrual books. There we go. Under projects, there is a new project intelligence subscription that provides better insight into projects, resources, utilization rates. This is a set of tools that have been developed that help project managers manage projects and employees better. It's an additional subscription, so reach out to your account manager if you have any questions about this and what you might necessarily want to use it for. Under projects themselves, there's a couple of nice new features. The first one is the ability to use terminology that makes sense inside your organization. So if you want to, sorry, there it is. There's terminology. If you're in a grant making organization and the term billable, which is the default value for transaction entry, really doesn't make any sense, you get the opportunity to describe this as a qualified expense. So it's not necessarily billable, but it's a qualified expense that gets qualified for any grant or any reimbursements you may have specifically for grants. So that's nice for the grant environment. In projects themselves, there's a new estimates tab that allows you to build estimates for your projects. I'll go ahead and pull that up so you can take a look at it. So we go into projects or grants. We list our projects and grants. And I'm going to pull up this project, which is Healthy Tomorrows. And you notice I have a new tab called Estimates. Now in Estimates, I get to, let's go ahead and edit this estimate. I get to identify a description, so I have multiple types of estimates. And within that estimate, I can identify elements of cost that I'm estimating against. So in this case, 100 hours at $75 an hour, or 250 hours at $125 an hour. I also get to integrate this to the GL. So if I want to push it to a budget in the GL, I can choose and push it to a project budget. So I can do budget versus actual reporting inside of the financial reporting module. But also I want you to note that you can have different types of estimates. So I may have original and then change order one. And so on and so forth. So I can have different revisions or versions of the estimate. And if it's as often is the case, you get a change order, but you want to keep the original estimate and just add the change order to itself, you can take the original estimate and then under this, go ahead and duplicate it and then call this change order one. And then make whatever adjustments you need to do down here relative to the change order and save it, and then have it update your budget inside the GL budget ledger if I want to as well. So very much more granularity in tracking the elements of cost and revenue inside your projects, and be able to do budget versus actual reporting right from the project management screen. Coming soon for those nonprofit and grant making organizations, there will be a new workflow that deals with operational workflow for grants. These are things like collecting non-financial data that's necessary, driving a specific workflow around it, and being able to manage your grant. So not just setting up the grant, but also managing the capturing of all the documents on all the workflow associated with those grants. It's not out yet, but we're expecting to come within this year. So a little teaser there for the future. In looking at some of the extended tools within side of Sage Intacct, ICRW is the interactive custom report writer. This is a report writer for users who have been using Sage Intacct for a while and now want to go deeper into reporting the data that they want to pull out outside of Sage Intacct. So we all know there's a standard report writer, and there are the standard reports that come outside of Sage Intacct. ICRW is more like a financial report writer that allows you to do pivot tables and analysis like that, and is useful for many of our customers. Again, they're trying to drive deep into the data that they have with inside of Sage Intacct. Sage continues to improve the learning journey for this, including new training that's available inside of the Sage University and on the website as well. So if you're looking to get better and deeper reports outside of Sage Intacct, talk to your rep about ICRW, see if it's a good fit for you, and how you might be able to proceed with that. They have added new reporting areas, ICRW, of course, as there's new feature functionality in Sage to continue to add that to ICRW. There's a new module, or a new subscription, I should say, inside of Sage Intacct for lease accounting. This is designed best for organizations that have multiple leases that need to track each of those leases, and do the appropriate postings to the general ledger. It handles all that postings as well. So if you have a lease and you've got to build out improvement and you need to amortize that over a period of time, lease accounting does all that for you. Again, we feel it fits best for organizations that have multiple leases and need to track 50 to 100 different leases for different locations, and need to do the accounting for that. And that's sort of a nightmare to do it in Excel and then bring it inside of Sage Intacct. PwC has put together a new compliance control insights for Sage Intacct. This is for audit purposes. Again, this is a subscription service, but it does provide more tighter controls over the operations of your Sage Intacct system. So reach out if there's some more information there you'd like to know. In an effort to improve the 1099 experience, Sage Intacct has also teamed up with Tax Bandits for e-filing. With this tool, no need to produce or print 1099s anymore, generate the file that you need to send to the IRS. Tax Bandits will handle that entire service for you from cradle to grave. So it's really one-stop shopping with respect to 1099s. So that summarizes the highlights of the enhancements that have come to Sage Intacct in the last year or so. And this is not the entirety of it all. These are just ones that I pulled out that I thought you might find of interest. They're, online with Sage. So if I go back to my home site, I always get a listing of what the new release notes are. So please take the time to go ahead and read through those release notes. You'll find gobs and gobs of details about it, as well as previous releases as well. And I think that, leveraging your use of Sage Intacct helps improve the investment that you put in Sage Intacct. And if one of these things can save you just 5 minutes a day, every day of your life, what could you do with that? But what if one of these things saves you 30 minutes of your day every day? What would you do with that additional time? And that's where I think these benefits really show their value. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chats here. Also, you can use this email address or reach out to Quisitive specifically for any questions. So I want to thank you for joining us for What's New with Sage Intacct. Enjoy the rest of the sessions out there. Don't forget to fill out your surveys because you want to be included in the drawings for those wonderful prizes at the end of the session. And I thank you very much for joining me. Have a great day.